The woman from the Whispering Hill. Nestled in the shadow of the ancient and sacred hills, the village of Kolimba had always carried an air of mystery. The hills, lush and untamed, were whispered about by the villagers in hushed tones, for they were not just a scenic backdrop to everyday life. They were steeped in legend, said to be the resting place of ancient spirits and forgotten gods. Every now and then, someone would go missing, vanishing without a trace, leaving only eerie silence behind. While many believed these disappearances were the result of simple misfortune, others claimed they were the work of the hills themselves, protective, jealous spirits that took those who dared to intrude on their sacred grounds. Among the village's most enduring mysteries was a figure who appeared as if from nowhere, a woman named Naina. It was said that she came from the mist that rolled off the hills at dawn, her silhouette barely visible through the fog, as if she had materialized from the very air. She was an enigma, captivating the hearts of all who saw her. Naina was a herbalist of sorts, known for selling rare and potent herbs, roots, and potions that no one else could find. Her wares were sought after by the villagers, who came to her in search of remedies for ailments or trinkets with purported magical properties, enchanted beads said to ward off evil, or amulets believed to bring good fortune. Though beautiful and graceful, Naina's past was a mystery that no one dared to probe. She had no known family or home, and she spoke little, preferring to communicate with a serene smile or the simple exchange of goods. No one knew where she lived or what drove her to appear from the mist each day, only that she always returned to the hilltop before nightfall. She avoided personal questions, and her aloofness only added to the intrigue that surrounded her. But of all those who were drawn to her, none were more captivated than Django, the village craftsman. Known for his golden voice and his generous heart, Django had a way with people. His songs could make even the hardest heart soften, and his hands crafted wonders, intricate carvings, finely wrought jewelry, and delicate trinkets. Despite his natural charm, Django had never been interested in romance. He was content with his craft, finding joy in his work and the simple pleasures of village life. But when Naina arrived in Kolimba, everything changed. At first, Django was drawn to her beauty and mystery. He would often find himself standing at the edge of the marketplace, watching as Naina exchanged her wares with the villagers. She seemed untouchable, like a spirit that wandered the earth for reasons unknown. But over time, Django noticed something more, her quiet strength, the depth in her eyes, and the sense that there was more to her than met the eye. There was a wisdom in her that he couldn't ignore, a tranquility that seemed to hold the village's bustling chaos at bay. In her presence, Django felt a stirring in his heart that he could not explain. The village elder, a man wise with age and experience, had warned Django to be cautious. He had seen the way Naina enchanted people, drawing them in with her allure, only for them to disappear or be changed beyond recognition. The hills are not kind to those who are curious, the elder had warned, his voice grave. There is something ancient in them, something that watches over us. And Naina, she is more a part of the hills than you may ever understand. But Django was not deterred. His heart, as generous as it was, could not be easily swayed by warnings. He began to court Naina, his voice and kindness a beacon to her solitude. He would walk with her along the village paths, listening as she spoke in quiet tones about the herbs she collected and the beads she crafted. Over time, she began to open up to him, sharing fleeting glimpses of her life, though never enough to reveal her full story. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the mist began to rise from the hills, Naina turned to Django with an almost imperceptible smile. Her eyes, deep and unreadable, met his. "Before you continue this," she said softly, "there is one condition I must ask of you." Django, his heart pounding with anticipation, nodded eagerly. "Anything," he promised, his voice steady. "Promise me," she said, her gaze unwavering, "that you will never follow me home." Django's brow furrowed slightly, the curiosity that had been building in him now a flame that threatened to burn bright. But he trusted her. He believed in her, and in that moment, he swore to her with all his heart that he would not question her request. "Of course," he said, his voice sincere. And with that promise, Naina's smile deepened, though her eyes remained shadowed by something unspoken. Then, she whispered, "We may continue." But even as he uttered his vow, a seed of doubt was planted in Django's heart. His curiosity had been aroused, and no matter how much he tried to suppress it, the question gnawed at him: why had she made such a strange request? What was it that lay hidden in the mist, in the hills, and in her heart? Django knew that the path he had chosen was one filled with mystery, and soon, his curiosity would lead him to a place where promises could be broken, and where the truth of Naina's past, and the secrets of the Whispering Hill, would begin to unravel. But for now, Django held on to his promise, even as the pull of the unknown grew stronger with every passing day. Django's forbidden curiosity. As the days passed, Django's feelings for Naina only grew stronger. What had begun as admiration for her beauty and grace had blossomed into something deeper, something all-consuming. He found himself unable to think of anything but her. Her quiet presence, the way her laughter seemed to ripple like a gentle breeze through the village, the mystery of her eyes that never revealed all that she truly was. It wasn't long before Django knew, without a doubt, that Naina was the one. The thought of spending his life without her by his side was unbearable. And so, one evening as the sun sank low behind the hills, casting a warm golden glow across the village, Django took a deep breath, knelt before Naina in the soft grass, and proposed. "Naina," he said, his voice rich with emotion, "I cannot imagine a life without you. Will you be mine? Will you marry me and let me love you for all of my days?" For a moment, Naina was silent, her expression unreadable. Her eyes, which had always seemed so distant, flickered with something Django could not name, perhaps fear, or a deep sadness. She stood there, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, the mist from the hills beginning to swirl at her feet as if it, too, waited for her answer. Finally, Naina spoke, her voice soft and steady. "Django, you are kind and generous. You have shown me more warmth than I have known in a long time. But I have a condition, a promise that must be made before we take this step." Django nodded eagerly, his heart racing. "Anything. I will promise you anything." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the hills beyond the village. "You must never ask about my past. You must never try to follow me to where I go when the sun sets, or question the things I have left behind." Django felt a knot form in his stomach. Her request seemed strange, even more so given their love for one another. But he understood that she was a woman of mystery, someone who had lived a life far different from his own, and he respected that. After all, he loved her deeply, and he would not ask for more than she was willing to give. "I promise," he said, his voice steady, though doubt began to stir within him. Naina's smile was small, but it was enough to reassure him. "Then, yes. I will marry you, Django. We will make a life together." The village erupted in joy upon hearing the news. Word of the engagement spread like wildfire, and preparations for the wedding began almost immediately. It was to be the biggest wedding the village had seen in many years. Django, the beloved craftsman with his golden voice, and Naina, the mysterious woman who had captured his heart, would join together in a union that seemed fated. The elders, especially Mama Agui, the village herbalist, sensed an uneasy stillness in the air, as if something hidden just beneath the surface was waiting to be revealed. But the villagers, caught up in the excitement, paid little heed to the elders' warnings. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with celebrations, laughter, and preparation. Yet, as the eve of their wedding arrived, Django's heart grew heavy with the weight of the promise he had made. The question that had gnawed at him for so long, the question of Naina's past, would not leave him. What was it that she had left behind? Why had she come to Kolimba? And what was it about the hills that held such sway over her? On the night before their wedding, unable to contain the burning curiosity within him, Django made a decision. He would follow her, just this once, to learn the truth. He would not speak of it to anyone, nor would he let his doubt show. But tonight, he would break his promise. As the village slept, Django crept from his home and made his way toward the hills. The mist had begun to rise once more, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. He knew Naina would soon leave, as she always did at dusk. And sure enough, when he reached the edge of the village, he saw her, silhouetted against the rising fog, walking gracefully toward the forest. His heart pounded in his chest as he moved closer, keeping to the shadows, careful not to make a sound. He followed her through the dense woods, the path growing darker with each step. Naina's form remained ahead of him, ethereal, moving as if the mist itself was guiding her. Soon, they reached a clearing, and Django watched, hidden in the shadows, as Naina came to a stop. The mist around her thickened, swirling, as if responding to some invisible command. And then, something that made his blood run cold happened. Naina's form began to change. At first, it was subtle. Her body seemed to ripple, her edges softening, blurring into the mist. And then, with a sudden and unnatural movement, she transformed completely, her shape elongating and twisting into something far more monstrous. Before Django's wide eyes, Naina became a great serpent, its scales shimmering with an iridescent glow. The massive creature slithered through the clearing, its long body gliding effortlessly between the ancient trees. Django's heart stopped. He could not believe what he was seeing. The woman he loved, the woman who had captured his heart, was no human at all, but a creature of legend, something born from the very midst of the hills. Terror surged through him. He stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The serpent, Naina, slithered deeper into the forest, vanishing into the darkness. His legs gave way beneath him, and he fled, running blindly back to the village, his mind racing with horror and confusion. He returned to his home, the events of the night playing over and over in his mind. He could not shake the image of Naina's transformation, the fear that had gripped him as she became something unearthly. But he could not speak of it. Not yet. He had made a promise, and despite everything, he still loved her. The next day, the village gathered for the wedding. The sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with joy. Naina appeared radiant, the picture of a bride, unaware of the turmoil swirling within Django's heart. He watched her, her beauty seeming even more ethereal, and he felt the weight of his secret pressing on him like a stone. When the ceremony began, Django stood beside her, his golden voice filling the air with vows of love and devotion. But in his heart, fear had replaced the joy he once felt. How could he marry her now, knowing the truth? How could he promise his life to a creature of the mist, a being so ancient and powerful that it could transform before his very eyes? Yet, despite his inner turmoil, Django went through with the ceremony. He stood there, his heart heavy, as Naina took his hand, her smile as beautiful and serene as it had always been. But as they exchanged vows, he could not shake the image of the serpent from his mind. The question that had started as mere curiosity had now become a haunting truth. And as they sealed their vows with a kiss, Django knew that his life would never be the same. The woman he had promised to love forever was something far greater, and far more dangerous, than he could have ever imagined. The wedding night revelation. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight as Django and Naina arrived at their new home. It was a modest cottage, nestled at the edge of the village, near the forest where the mist seemed to linger always. The sounds of the night creatures began to echo through the air, and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze brought an eerie calm to the scene. For Django, it felt like stepping into a dream, yet beneath the surface of his joy, an undercurrent of unease stirred in his chest. He had married the woman he loved, but now, as the night began to settle in, he could not ignore the terrifying truth he had witnessed. Naina was not human. She was something else, something born of magic and mystery, her form capable of shifting from the grace of a woman to the monstrous beauty of a serpent. But tonight, as his new wife moved about their cottage, preparing a traditional meal with herbs and ingredients that only she seemed to know how to procure, he tried to push the fear aside. This was their wedding night. It should be a time of joy, of celebration. So, Django told himself he would pretend. He would smile and act as though everything were normal, as though he hadn't glimpsed the terrifying truth hidden beneath her skin. Naina moved gracefully about their new home, her hands dancing as she walked. She crushed herbs with ease, adding magical ingredients to the pot, their scent fragrant and intoxicating. She hummed softly to herself as she cooked, her voice lilting in a way that made Django's heart ache with longing. She was beautiful, as she had always been, but now, there was a strange, almost otherworldly quality to her presence. The way the light from the moon filtered through the windows, casting a silver glow across her skin, made Django's heart race, not with love, but with something else. A deep, unsettling fear that crept up his spine. As Naina set the table and placed the meal before him, Django tried to act as though nothing had changed. He smiled at her, but his eyes lingered on her glowing form, the way her skin seemed to shimmer under the moonlight. It was almost as though she were radiating energy, a strange, magical light that he couldn't quite understand. The silence between them stretched, and Naina noticed the shift in Django's energy. His warmth had gone, replaced with something colder, something distant. Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, narrowed slightly, her lips parting as she studied him closely. She could feel it, the subtle shift in his emotions, the way his gaze no longer held the same adoration it once had. It was as if his love for her had been replaced with something else. Fear. Naina's pulse quickened. She had always known that the secrets of her past would one day come to light, but she had hoped to keep them hidden just a little longer. Now, she could feel the truth in the air between them. Django knew. He had seen something she could never explain away. The room seemed to grow colder, the soft glow of the moonlight flickering through the cracks in the walls. Naina's breath caught in her throat, and without warning, her body began to shift. Her skin, which had been glowing so softly before, began to ripple, like the surface of a still pond disturbed by a single drop of water. Her flesh moved, as if it were fabric, peeling away in long, smooth sheets. Django froze, his heart hammering in his chest as he watched, unable to look away, even though every instinct screamed at him to run. Naina's form began to unravel, her skin falling away like cloth, revealing the truth beneath. She was no longer the woman he had married, no longer the woman he had loved with all his heart. Beneath her human exterior, there was something far more ancient and powerful. She was half woman, half snake, a being of magic, her body entwined with the very essence of the earth and the spirits that ruled it. Her serpent coils emerged, curling and twisting with the grace of a creature born of the wild. Her face, once soft and beautiful, was now a mix of human features and the sleek, scaled skin of a serpent. Her eyes glowed with an inner fire, the pupils slit like those of a predator. Django's mind reeled, his breath catching in his throat as he finally let out a scream, a raw, primal cry of terror and disbelief. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman he had married, the woman he had promised to love, was no longer the person he had thought she was. She was something else, something far darker and more terrifying. The sound of his scream echoed through the night, and it wasn't long before the neighbors heard it. One by one, they rushed to the cottage, their feet thudding against the earth as they ran toward the source of the noise. They pushed open the door to find Django standing there, trembling, his eyes wide with horror, staring at the figure of Naina in the corner of the room. Naina had collapsed, her body coiled into a tight ball, her hands clutching at her face as tears rolled down her cheeks. The serpent that had once been her graceful form was now a twisted, contorted version of itself, trembling with sorrow and fear. "I beg the spirits to let me live among you," Naina sobbed, her voice cracking with anguish. "I beg them, Django. I beg them to let me walk among humans, to love and be loved." But now I have broken the sacred oath. I have become cursed. And there is no way back. Django stood frozen, his mind a storm of confusion and dread. The truth was out now. He could no longer pretend that Naina was simply a woman. She was a creature of magic, bound by forces far greater than he had ever imagined. The neighbors gathered around, some stepping back in fear, while others, including Mama Agui, the village herbalist, stepped forward with a deep sense of authority. Her eyes were fixed on Naina, and her voice was firm, cutting through the tension in the room. Enough of this, Mama Agui said, her voice a steady command. Naina, you will not hide from us any longer. The time has come for the truth to be known. What are you? Naina lifted her head, her serpent eyes glistening with a mixture of shame and sorrow. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of her secret. I am the daughter of Omosi, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The river god. I was once a being of the spirit realm, a creature of water and magic. But I broke an oath, a sacred promise to the spirits. And for that, I was cast into the mortal realm, cursed to live in flesh as a human. I can never return to my true form. The room fell into silence as the villagers absorbed her words. Mama Agui stepped forward, her face etched with concern and understanding. The spirits are not kind to those who break their oaths, Mama Agui murmured. And yet, you walked among us, hoping to find solace, to find love. Naina's tears flowed freely now. I thought that by marrying Django, by becoming part of his world, I could escape the curse. I wanted to be like you all. I wanted to live a life of peace. But now, I fear it is too late. Django's heart ached as he looked at her, at the woman he had loved and married, the woman who had become something far more than he could ever understand. The love he had for her was still there, but so was the fear. And in the silence of that moment, the truth was clear. Naina's curse was not just hers to bear, it was now his to carry as well, trial by oracle. The village of Kolimba, once filled with the bustle of simple life and joyous celebrations, now stood frozen in fear and fascination. Word had spread quickly, Naina's truth had been revealed, and the mysterious woman who had captivated them all was not who they had believed her to be. Her transformation, her curse, and her desperate plea for understanding had shaken the foundations of the village. The elders, the wise and ancient voices of the community, had convened and decided that the only way to resolve the matter was to call upon the Oracle of Kolimba. The Oracle was a sacred figure, a blind girl chosen by the gods, possessed by the spirits of ancestors who spoke through her. She was the village's bridge to the divine, and it was said that her words could either heal or curse. Her judgments were never questioned, for they were seen as the will of the gods themselves. Now, on this fateful night, she would pass judgment on Naina's fate, and that of Django, who had unknowingly entered a bond that transcended life itself. The moon hung high above the village, casting a pale silver light over the circle of ancestry, a sacred ground where generations of Kolimba's ancestors were honored. The villagers gathered in a circle, their faces a mixture of awe and fear, murmuring amongst themselves as they awaited the oracle's arrival. Naina stood at the center, her serpent coils coiled around her like a protective shroud, her eyes downcast in sorrow. Django stood beside her, his heart heavy with guilt and confusion. He had never imagined that the woman he had loved, whose mystery had drawn him in so completely, would lead him to such a terrible truth. The oracle arrived, led by two elders. Her sightless eyes were covered by a cloth, her face serene, as though untouched by the chaos around her. Her steps were slow and deliberate, her feet moving with the grace of someone who navigated the world through senses far deeper than the physical. When she reached the center of the circle, she raised her hands, and the villagers fell silent. The oracle's voice was soft but commanding, echoing through the night. The time has come, she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. The spirits have gathered. The curse that binds this woman and this man must be judged, and the path to salvation revealed. Naina, her voice trembling, began to speak, recounting the tale of her past. She told of her rebellion against the gods, the moment when she had defied the ancient order of the spirit realm. She had been born of water and magic, a daughter of Omosi, the river god. But she had longed for something more, something human. She had witnessed the love between mortals, the joy of walking among them, and the warmth of human touch. Desperate, she had sought a way to transform herself into a mortal being, believing that love would be her salvation. The ritual she had performed was dangerous, an ancient spell that required a powerful sacrifice. She had sacrificed her immortality, her divine nature, binding herself to the mortal realm. The price had been steep. She had broken her sacred oath to the gods, and for that, she was cursed to walk in human flesh, never to return to the world of spirits. "I wanted to be like you," Naina confessed, her voice breaking. "I wanted to know love. I wanted to know what it was like to belong." The oracle's expression remained unchanged, but her voice carried the authority of all the ancestors who had ever spoken through her. "Naina, daughter of Omosi, you have sought what you cannot possess. You have defied the gods and bound yourself to a mortal man. But now, the time for judgment has come." The oracle turned to Django, her blind gaze piercing him as if she could see through him. "Django, son of Kolimba, you stand at the crossroads of fate. You have sworn your love to Naina. But love, in its purest form, cannot exist in the shadow of lies and secrets." The oracle's words weighed heavily on Django's heart. He had once been so certain of his love for Naina. He had wanted her, desired her mystery, her beauty, her enigma. But now, standing here in the face of the truth, he was forced to confront something he had buried deep within himself, the fact that he had never truly loved the woman before him. Not in the way she deserved. The oracle's voice cut through the silence, demanding an answer. "Django, do you still love her? Do you love her for who she truly is, with all her secrets and her truth?" Django hesitated. His mind whirled with the revelations of the past few days, the fear, the confusion, the realization that the woman he had fallen for was something so much more complex and terrifying than he could ever have imagined. Did he still love her, despite everything? Or had he only been in love with the idea of her? Finally, his voice cracked as he spoke, the truth spilling out like a confession he could no longer suppress. I wanted her mystery," he said, his words raw with regret. "I loved the idea of her, the woman I thought she was, not the woman she truly is. I loved her for what she could be, not for who she is." A heavy silence fell over the circle of ancestry. The oracle's expression hardened as she processed his words. The spirit stirred, and the air seemed to grow thick with the weight of their judgment. The oracle's voice broke the silence, cold and final. "Then you shall carry her truth for eternity." Django's heart dropped as the oracle raised her hands to the sky, invoking a spell that had not been cast in centuries. The air around him grew heavy, and he felt a powerful force settle over him, as if an invisible chain had wrapped itself around his heart. His breath caught in his chest as he looked at Naina, whose eyes were now filled with understanding and sorrow. The oracle's words echoed through the night. "You, Django, will be bound to Naina. You will carry her truth, her burden, and her curse for eternity. You will be her guardian spirit, neither alive nor dead, tied to her until you learn the meaning of unconditional love." A deep pain shot through Django's chest as the spell took hold. His body felt like it was being pulled apart, as if his very soul was being stretched and twisted. He tried to move, to cry out, but no words came. He felt his form shift, as though he were no longer entirely human. The sensation was unbearable, but it was also inevitable. The curse had been placed upon him, and now he was bound to Naina, not in love, but in duty, in eternal servitude. He was to watch over her, to protect her, and to be her companion for as long as it took him to truly understand the depth of unconditional love. Django fell to his knees, gasping for breath, his mind reeling. He could feel the presence of Naina, the warmth of her body still near him, but also something else, something that tied them together in an inescapable bond. He could feel her pain, her sorrow, and her longing as though it were his own. The curse was not just hers to bear, it was his now as well. The oracle's final words rang out, both a sentence and a hope, only when you have learned to love without conditions will you be free. Until then, you are bound. As the oracle stepped back, the moonlight shone brighter, and the villagers slowly dispersed, leaving Django and Naina alone at the center of the circle of ancestry. There, in the silence of the night, Django knew his life had been irrevocably altered. The love he had once believed in had been shattered, and in its place was a new truth, one that would shape his destiny forever, Forest of Redemption. Banished from Kolimba, Django and Naina wandered into the depth of the Forest of the Ancients, a place that was both a refuge and a prison for the lost souls of the earth. The dense forest, thick with centuries-old trees and veils of mist, had once been Naina's true home, long before she had chosen a mortal life. It was here, among the towering oaks and whispering winds, that her past was both buried and held in waiting. Now, as the two of them traversed its dark, tangled paths, it was clear that this was a place of reckoning, a land where the old gods still lingered, and the secrets of the world had been written long before they had ever walked. For Django, the journey through the forest was more than a physical one. With every step, he felt his soul shifting, the weight of his curse still heavy on his shoulders, but now beginning to feel less like a burden and more like a path, one that could lead him to wisdom and understanding, if only he would open his heart wide enough to embrace it. Naina, too, had changed. She was no longer the distant, enigmatic figure she had once been. Though she remained beautiful, her eyes, once filled with the mystery of ancient power, were now touched with something different, the raw ache of regret, the sorrow of someone who had longed for love but had been condemned by the very forces she had sought to defy. She no longer wore the serpent coils of her curse. They had sloughed off when the curse was cast upon Django. Yet she had not regained her full human form, she was a liminal being, caught between the mortal world and the world of the spirits. As they wandered deeper into the forest, the air thickened with the presence of ancient power. The trees seemed to whisper their ancient knowledge, the ground soft beneath their feet, as though it, too, was aware of their passage. It was not long before they came to a clearing where a great river flowed, its waters dark and deep, winding through the trees like a silver snake. Naina stopped here, her breath catching in her throat as she looked at the river, its waters flowing endlessly. It was then that the figure appeared, a towering, regal presence, made of water and mist. Omosi, the river god, stood before them, his body shimmering with an ethereal glow. His form was both solid and liquid, ever-changing, like the river itself. His eyes, deep and unfathomable, rested on his daughter, and then, after a long moment, turned to Django. "You have broken my daughter," Omosi's voice echoed like the roar of a storm, deep and resonant. "You have taken her from the realm of spirits and bound her to the mortal world. Do you understand the weight of what you have done?" Django, his heart heavy with guilt and fear, stood in silence, knowing that there was nothing he could say to undo the damage. But as he looked at Naina, he saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, the same pain that he had come to understand more and more in the years since the curse had bound them together. He had come to realize that Naina's rebellion was not the work of someone seeking power, but of someone seeking to belong. She had longed for the love of mortals, the warmth of companionship. And in her yearning, she had broken the very balance of life and death, of spirit and flesh. "It was never my intention to hurt her," Django said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love her, but I was blind to what that really meant." Omosi regarded him for a long moment, and then, with a wave of his hand, the river began to swell. It became a torrent, rushing forward with immense power, surrounding them both. Naina's form shimmered, and her eyes closed as if listening to the river's voice. "You have walked the path of pride and ignorance, Django," Omosi said, his voice like thunder in the distance. But your love is not yet pure. You must understand the depth of sacrifice and humility. You must walk the way of the Spirit, not as a mortal, but as a soul. Only then will you learn the true meaning of love. Django's heart clenched as he realized what Omosi was asking. It was not enough for him to simply stand by Naina and say he loved her. He had to become something more, something greater than his own selfish desires. He had to shed the layers of fear and pride that had once blinded him and learn what it meant to love without condition, without expectation. The years passed in the forest of the ancients. Django and Naina lived in quiet solitude, far from the village of Kolimba. They learned from the river god and the spirits who visited them in dreams. Naina, too, had her own journey, reconciling the parts of herself that she had lost, the human parts and the divine parts. She came to understand that her rebellion had been a longing for connection, but that true love required more than just a desire to be loved. It required selflessness, patience, and an openness to the vulnerability of the heart. Django, too, changed. He did not transform into a being of magic, nor did he shed his human form. Instead, he became something far more profound. His soul grew wise with humility. The selfish love he had once felt for Naina, driven by his own desires, was replaced with a love that saw her as she truly was, not a mystery to be solved, but a person to be understood, with all her strengths, flaws, and histories. Over time, Django began to understand Naina's pain, her beauty, and her strength in a way that transcended her form. He no longer saw her as an object of fascination, but as a soul worthy of love and respect. And eventually, one evening, as the moon rose high above the forest, casting its silver glow on the river, Django turned to Naina with a question that had been growing in his heart for years. "Naina," he said, his voice soft, "I have walked with you through all of this, and I have come to know you in ways that I never imagined. And now, I ask, will you let me stay by your side, not from duty or obligation, but because I love you, truly and completely?" Naina's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of something deeper, a recognition of the truth that had finally come to both of them. She stepped forward, and with a gentle touch, she placed her hand on his cheek. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I will. I have longed for this, Django. But it is you who must understand. You must understand that love, true love, is not born of need or longing, but of seeing one another fully, and accepting what is." Omosi, watching from the river, nodded. His presence, once so formidable, now felt peaceful, as though he, too, recognized that the time for judgment had passed. The river god raised his hand, and the waters parted around them. "You have learned, Django," Omosi said, his voice gentle. "You have understood the meaning of unconditional love. And now, I lift the curse." In an instant, the curse that had bound Naina to the spirit realm was lifted. She was fully mortal now, her body no longer touched by the divine, but human and whole. The transformation was not dramatic, but quiet, a peaceful settling of her spirit into the mortal world, free at last from the chain that had held her. Together, Django and Naina made their way back to Kolimba. They did not return as outcasts or as creatures of legend, but as two souls who had learned the deepest truths of love and sacrifice. The village, which had once feared them, now greeted them with awe and reverence. They were no longer the mysterious figures from the hills or the cursed ones, but heroes who had walked through fire and come out the other side, stronger and more united than ever. Years later, when Django and Naina had grown old together, they would sit by the fire, telling the story of their journey to the younger generations of Kolimba. And as they gathered around, Mama Agui, the wise herbalist who had once seen the danger in their love, would tell the children, "True love isn't blind, it sees everything and stays. It sees the flaws, the pain, the truths that can break us, and it stays anyway. That is the love that will endure." And so, their story became legend, one of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between two souls who had walked the difficult path of redemption, hand in hand.